Great. Well, welcome. Are we live? Yes, we are live. Welcome to the Thursday, December 5th Economic Development Committee, and calling the meeting to order. And our first, do we need to do roll call? Please?
Yeah, Committee Member Kane.
Here.
Committee Member Charles won't be able to make it. Committee Member Chasty is not here. Committee Member Goldman won't be able to make it. Committee Member Sala.
Here.
Committee Member Tiedemann.
Here.
And Chair Montag.
Here. Okay, thank you. So item 2, approval of minutes. Any comments on the minutes?
I had one. Should the minutes note that we lost quorum last time, didn't get fully through our agenda?
I apologize. I wrote the minutes and I wasn't here. I was
All
also
right.
told that someone wasn't. Oh, you're not even going to sit up here.
He's got to be across the street.
I know.
Yeah.
You can sit up here for a couple minutes.
Nah,
No?
it's fine.
Yes.
We'll make that edit.
Thank you.
And I just had a question about the broker presentation. I just wanted to hear if it was worthwhile. Was there any insight or anything that was, I don't need to, I just was curious if it was worth hearing it. I think I would have loved to have been here, so just curious what people thought about that.
I thought it was interesting. I thought, his main comment seemed to be that Oakland is, getting a lot more office space interest. There's a lot of, sales rental going on there that wasn't before, and that's driving the larger real estate economy.
Anything else? Well, maybe, I'm just wondering if we should maybe on a quarterly basis, if we can try to do that. I think it'd be cool to have, so. With that, do you have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
A second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Moving on to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda?
I was wondering, because I thought we were going to add something, or if you guys were going to add here, I don't know. Something about looking at the different welcome brochures for different cities for when you start a business. Was there, you were going to do some work on that?
I think there was a marketing brochure that was presented, and we were going to look at that and review that. Yeah.
And then also look at, I had made the suggestion of going to maybe some other cities that were similar to ours, which is like Albany was an example that I gave, to see what their welcome packets were like, because oftentimes we felt like businesses were not necessarily feeling welcomed when they began business in Albany. Or
Okay.
maybe they didn't have all the resources. So this was something that was part of
All right.
what we had talked about, and I didn't see it here. So.
Okay. So maybe under the committees, we can address that. Okay.
So, yeah, I had the chance to attend the business resiliency meeting this afternoon on behalf of the chamber as well as my business. It was a great meeting, and I see it's on the agenda, so I think it's something that the city should certainly, or the Economic Development Committee should just certainly support.
All right. Any other comments not on the agenda you want to talk about? Okay, we'll close public comment.
Yes.
Thank you. And we'll move on to announcements.
Yes, actually, sorry.
Pardon?
You just reminded me of something else about which group did planning and zoning, about talking about banning any gas from any new buildings, or I don't know if it was residential only, or they're talking about new construction in the city of Albany, or the city has been looking at possibly doing something similar developed in this sense, and businesses are to come in and find out that they can't do a gas stove in a place where only their cooking might work in a gas stove or do construction. I'm just advising that we need to keep our ears to the ground on that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Could affect business.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so any other public comment? We'll close it again. To go to item 4, announcements.
Yes. At 1178 Solano, there's a new business called Umami Interiors that's now open. It's it's owned by a local interior designer who has local clients and decided to open a business. I haven't been there yet, but I've heard good things. And then at 1407 Solano, formerly Cafe Valparaiso, they have a commercial kitchen, and we've been working with the broker there to push for a restaurant since there's an existing commercial kitchen, but we have an application received for building upgrades for a music school. We received a use permit, parking waiver, and they're looking to do building upgrades. It's not our preferred use for a ground floor retail space. They're demolishing a perfectly good commercial kitchen, and we think they're likely to experience some pushback from neighbors regarding noise and parking concerns.
Do we know if any questions from the committee? I have a question. Do they have a business already somewhere?
Yes, they do.
I don't know if that's public, though.
Well, no, I mean, they've been teaching for years.
Yeah.
They're part of, I know the kids and the family at Cornell.
So they have an existing business somewhere?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have a question. In a situation like this, what are the, I mean, does the city have an opportunity to deny something like that if people were against that type of use in that space? Or would it, have to violate parking, or what would be the situation that would, if there is a situation where the city could or couldn't say, you can have a business here or can't?
The planning and zoning, they need a use permit, so the Planning and Zoning Commission could deny the use permit. They'd need to have a good reason for that, and I think they would probably look towards the general plan or the economic development strategy and say that it's not, make a determination whether they feel like it's consistent with the goals of those two planning documents. And then if they don't, they should be able to mitigate noise issues, but if they're not proposing to do something about noise, that might also be an issue. Parking less so, since it's an existing structure, but the impact of noise might be a real issue for surrounding businesses or residences.
I do know they were talking about doing quite a bit of soundproofing inside the building, and not only that, but that particular block needs some life right now. There's no parking issues right in that area because there's nothing there to go visit. And quite honestly, it's such a big brick building, I don't see why anybody would have a problem. And all of the other schools and stuff that have popped up along Solano seem to actually be attracting even more families and more business. So I would really, as far as I'm concerned, I would nothing but support this business.
Good to know. Thank you. Any other questions from the from the board? Anybody want to speak publicly about this item? No, I just need to do that. That's my role. So, if not, then we'll close this item and move on to presentations. Sales tax report. Do we have a presentation?
Went a little faster than I expected. So I'm just putting the image up on the screen that you have at your dais. We have a consultant that helps us collect data and monitor our sales tax. And this graph shows you the trends in the last few years for different categories of businesses. The, overall, things are increasing modestly, 2 to 3% from overall in aggregate, which is kind of the Albany way. We don't have big swings up and down, unlike some other cities that have more cyclical industries. The variations that you do see in some of these categories, for example, in the transportation category, there's a swing there in 2017. That was one particular business. Due to confidentiality reasons, I'm not supposed to get into the details of particular businesses that might be contributing to this, but that's a particular business that had some changes in their product mix, and the same goes with the construction line further down, kind of the gold color. That was a particular business that went through some changes. For the most part, what this seems to tell me is that there's a slow decline in general retail, which is kind of consistent with national trends with online shopping, a nice steady increase in restaurants, and everything else is pretty stable. The green is business-to-business types of transactions. And like I say, it looks pretty steady. Our consultants also make some projections for the finance department, and they don't see anything in the details of the underlying data that would indicate a big problem in the future. The second part of the information I provided you, well, I'll stop right there for a second and see if you have any questions about this graph.
Any questions?
It'd be interesting to see how our sales tax revenues have changed from online sales as well.
So it's a little harder to track that because historically a lot of those transactions apparently weren't being taxed appropriately, and it's only in the last few years that some state laws have changed. I'm not an authority on all the new laws, but we are increasing the revenue in online transactions. That's collected, in most cases, it's collected county-wide into one pool and then distributed to cities by a formula. I think it's based on population. So you can't really see the variations of, us versus Berkeley or something like that. But we are collecting, so we collect in the last year about $120,000 in sales taxes from online transactions, in addition to what's on the screen. I'm sure there's a lot more transactions going on that aren't taxed, but apparently state laws are changing to better capture those.
And would that be reflected in the miscellaneous?
No, this is the graph that you see are local physical businesses physically located.
Understood. Okay.
The miscellaneous represents
It is okay.
health care kinds of things, and miscellaneous others.
What's the total of all this? Like, what's the total in
of all
sales?
of that is $2.4 million in 2019.
And by you and the consultant's estimate, is that sort of increase in restaurants going to probably continue? Because that's a pretty significant increase from, 6 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if they made projections by, well, yes, they did. Hang on a second. They're continuing to, they've kind of aggregated restaurants and grocery stores into food products, but they're continuing to project growth in that food products category of 4 to 5% per year.
Great.
And overall, I think our growth rate is 2.7%.
Any other questions? What?
Oh, sorry. Golden Gate Fields,
like gambling? Is there a tax assessed to winnings, or does that?
There is a wager tax.
That's not.
That's not.
Okay, got it.
What is captured in restaurants is the turf club.
Got it.
But not the wagering.
Got it.
Which is a different category.
Got it.
Do we know how much is collected by the tax on Golden Gate Fields?
It's like
I do have that data. I don't have it off the top of my head, but
Right.
we collected that information about a year ago. I want to say it's in the $700,000-800,000 range.
yeah, that's, I remember. Yeah,
Something
around
like
A
that.
million
About
was
that,
what I
yeah.
remember.
It had quite a bit down.
Yeah.
It- It's right, because
Off-track wagering.
the off-track, if you wager physically at Golden Gate Fields, we collect part of that. If you wager sitting in your seat using your phone, we don't. So there's a, which is what apparently everybody's starting to do, so we're losing there.
Any comments, public?
I was just noticing that 2 out of 3 of the top, sales tax areas are general retail and restaurants. So I just feel like I hope the city pays attention to that and the fact that I think that's we need to make sure that we take care of our businesses and our retail and knowing these facts.
Understood. Okay.
I'd like to think that this demonstrates we have taken care of. We do work hard to reach out to businesses and resolve any issues that they have in getting permits.
Good point.
All right. Anything else on presentation?
So the second part of this that's also the dais was a newsletter that our consultant puts together. And the first 5 pages are more kind of national trends. Beginning on page 6, they look more specifically at retailing trends. I thought there was a couple of interesting little factoids. I'll just mention them briefly. I didn't realize this, but this holiday season has 6 shopping days less than last holiday season. And so they're predicting, as they go through this narrative, they're predicting that there may be more online shopping because of that. People will just feel like a little bit more rushed. But overall, they have a prediction of 4.5% to 5% increase in holiday sales this year compared to last year. And a lot of these are information, they're referencing other industry research that's been done. And then on the very last page is a list of particular retailers and some of the news that are coming from those retailers, and I thought I would mention 3 of them that have outlets in Albany. The first is on the left-hand column, about halfway down, CVS. I guess they've announced that they'll be closing 75 retail stores in 2020, mostly through lease expirations. I don't know what the status of the lease in Albany is, but that is a leased store. So that's something to put on our radar screen. On the right-hand side, Sprouts, obviously already here, but it looks like they're continuing to grow and opening new locations. And then Target, they've announced closing 6 stores in 2019 and opening 30 smaller stores and remodeling 300 stores. I asked the consultant about our Target and in comparison to performance of Targets in the East Bay, and in their judgment, ours was doing relatively well. Big box is not doing super well in general, but compared to some of the others, they're doing pretty well, and Target is investing in this store. So we don't have any reason to believe that we're at risk there, but that is a big part. If you go back to looking at general retail, Target is a really big part of that number in blue on the graph. So I thought all those would just be little interesting pieces of information for you. And the whole thing is kind of interesting and a relatively quick read, so we'll continue to provide these. We want to make this kind of a habit. As we meet with this consultant quarterly, and after we do that, we'll make sure to give you a rolling update as we get this information.
Just curious if there's a way to outreach to the property owner of CVS or I'd be happy to do it if someone gives me their number, but if
Yeah.
staff knows that, I think it might be a good conversation to get in front of that, if possible.
I know in the past that site has been identified as a potential strategic location for a parking lot. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, any other comments on this item?
I'd say that, so all of this makes pretty clear that, online retail is having a pretty significant effect on the money that Albany's taking in and the businesses here. So I wonder if there's any, pertinent state legislation that's come out of this session that's going to affect how that's taxed, or, if this might be a good future agenda item to get a summary of what can be done to get some of that money back into the city, or what we could maybe recommend to council to do about that.
I think you're right, but the picture doesn't show that to me.
Well, if we're seeing a, significant long-term decline in general retail, and that, our Target's doing okay, but generally Targets are doing pretty bad, then that seems, and I mean, we all know that online retail is having a big effect on these things, so it seems like that may be an important thing for us to consider, or at least know about if there's any ongoing efforts in Sacramento to help deal with that.
Agreed.
Be happy to bring that back. I would need to educate myself a little bit on that as well. It's not something that I follow super closely.
Understood. Anything else? Then we will, any questions? Then we'll move on to item 6, discussions, actions 6-1, business resilience discussion.
Yes, so as I mentioned a couple months ago, we're working with Suzanne Frew of the Frew Group, who is a local Albany resident, to develop a business resilience strategy and a toolkit for local businesses to help businesses prepare for disasters, including providing assistance in terms of creating continuity plans and other kinds of preparedness measures. We met today with a small group of business owners to begin a conversation, sort of a stakeholder group, to talk about how we can help support businesses in preparing for disasters, during disasters, and after disasters in terms of recovery. And we had a great conversation a couple hours ago, and we want to continue that conversation here at your meeting. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions that were similar to the questions that we talked about at that meeting. First, I will share, I think we've talked about this before. Earlier. We have a local hazard mitigation plan that outlines a variety of disasters that we're concerned about and has a list of mitigation actions to address them. And I have the list here, but I will just, oh, there you go. I was going to read it to you. So I don't know if this is in order of our concern, but this is a list of potential disasters that are outlined in our plan. Certainly earthquakes are something that's of concern to us. I'll back up for a second before I keep reading this list. We have a variety of disaster preparedness and resilience efforts in the city going on concurrently. So we have our local hazard mitigation plan to sort of reduce the impact of disasters before they occur. We also have our emergency operations plan, which is managed by our fire department. We have a staff, we call them the Disaster Preparedness Technical Advisory Committee. Jeff and I are both on. We meet quarterly, actually more than quarterly, to talk about disaster preparedness in each of our city departments. And this business resilience component is a component of our full disaster preparedness program that we're launching. So when we're talking about disaster, we're talking about these things: earthquakes, infrastructure failure, severe weather, wildfire, terrorism, which would include active shooter, sea level rise and other climate change effects, hazardous materials release, flooding, landslide, public health epidemic. Included in wildfire that's not on this list, because we wrote this list in 2016, is smoke impacts and air quality related to wildfire or other kinds of disasters. We understand now that that's actually a big issue for us. The other thing that's not on this list but is included in infrastructure failure is this electrical grid failure, a planned power outage we'd include on that list too. So some people locally have experienced some of those things in the past few years, and it may feel closer to home. So my first question for you is, one, is there anything missing from this list that you're concerned about? And two, are there any things, what are the, if you want to share your top one or two things, either if you're a business owner or if you kind of want to put yourself in that position, what are the things that you think are most important for businesses to plan for? Obviously, we want them to be prepared for any of them, but.
Do you want to go first?
I think it's an extremely comprehensive list, and I think the two additions were great. I can't think of anything to add right now.
Is that a list of something that's happened to every business in Albany?
No.
We hope not.
It's just,
Especially the sea level rise, Robert. Golden Gate Fields,
Aaron, do you have any comment?
I know, I was just going to agree that I think it's a very good list, and I think including the, PG&E's planned power cuts is a good addition.
Sure.
Hopefully those don't go on forever and aren't as inevitable as sea level rise, but,
Mm-hmm.
We might consider adding power surges that happen after those things. We recently lost some equipment.
Wow. At a different store.
So while you're digesting those, so wildfire, to me, I think just fire, because just the proximity of all the businesses together, seems like one could catch and then it could go in either direction. It would be more of a concern than a wildfire, but that would be my only.
Yeah, the urban conflagration piece.
That means.
Yeah.
So this is a list that was prepared to understand for emergency preparedness purposes, and they're asking us if we had anything to add to that list or felt if there was.
No turkeys?
That's under terrorism.
Anything else? We'll close it then. I mean, I'm going to close it till public. You have any additions, deletions, or?
I mean, there are always things that, you hear of, like, oh, this place had never experienced an earthquake before, so maybe one more thing to add to the list might be random natural disasters that don't normally occur.
Yeah, the hurricanes are coming.
Mother
Yeah,
nature.
we talked about when we developed this plan, we had a comprehensive list of all the potential natural disasters. We talked about tsunami because there is a possibility for it, but because we're in the Bay, we realized it probably wasn't enough of an issue for us to rise to the level of having it in this plan. But yes, you're right. We're learning every year. There's something we didn't expect, right? Yeah.
And maybe certain solutions could be, this could be used in this situation.
Yeah.
If
So-
you're in Las Vegas, who knew you'd have to deal with locusts? I mean,
In terms of developing a plan or to help businesses bolster their own preparedness and resilience, what do you see as barriers to businesses that have to getting prepared? Our sense from our earlier conversation today is that people aren't all that prepared, although they think it's maybe important, particularly the smaller businesses. Larger businesses, Target, Safeway, I talked to they have people who are focused on this. So I think the larger businesses maybe take out of this equation because they already have those resources, and they have offsite, they have a lot more resources. But in terms of our small mom and pop shops in Albany, what do you see as the barriers to getting them prepared and maybe how we might overcome them? I know that's a huge question, but that's kind of what we're grappling with right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I mentioned two things in prior workshops. I mean, the first is that, the wonderful thing about Solano Avenue is we have every culture represented, and we don't have the ability to communicate with every culture. And so I think the messaging is important in terms of how you convey it. But in terms of earthquakes, it's just one of those things where I think when people, especially since we probably all have out-of-town visitors, I think people think it's one of those things that I think people don't really feel like it's going to happen. Like, to a degree, it's one of those things that it doesn't scare you because you've never been in one. Like, not a lot of people have been in an earthquake. You have to know your fault and all this other stuff. And so it's just one of those mystery things. And I think there's a certain denial about it. Like, it hasn't happened in 30 years. Last one was 1987. I don't even remember that game. And I think that people are completely unprepared in that regard. Because we just haven't had any activity.
Speaking from personal experience, I struggle with knowing how to prepare as a business and in what ways to prepare. Like at home, I'm very prepared. I have, kits and water and all kinds of stuff. But for my business, I don't know in what ways I need to be prepared. Like, who do I need to be prepared to take care of? Or if people, my plan is just close and let people go home to their families, but maybe they can't go home, in which case we do need, food and emergency food and things like that. Or I just don't know. So.
Yeah, and is there, it's a question of like, how long can you close? You're losing money in order to do that. Do your employees need jobs and an income too? And some of those kind of questions. I think what we're hoping to provide is those resources, those suggestions about how to create a plan for your business. So it sounds like hopefully that would be useful to you. And we're thinking about starting with a website because we did a quick survey. I'm going to do a larger survey to send out to businesses specific to this issue, but the sense was people want an online resource. No guarantee that we'll have power where people can actually utilize that. So the thought is we'll start with an online resource and then maybe mail everyone a print guide, very simple,
Like
just
a checklist would
a
be.
checklist kind of thing that then, can be buried in a drawer and you can dig it out if you need it kind of thing. So we're thinking of doing both of those. So you think that would be useful?
For me, that would be great. I just don't know. We have a flashlight. We've got like our emergency power outage kit where we have square card readers and things like that. But, the just not even being able to comprehend quite like how to prepare or what I need to do to prepare. So that would be very helpful to have that information.
Yes.
Albany's done a lot of work on earthquake preparedness, starting back in the 80s. And so to the extent that has hit the business district, that's great, but if it hasn't, there's some very basic things you can do to avoid major disasters at your employment, like strapping your water heater, making sure you don't have a fire from that, making sure you don't get gas leaks because of that. Same thing with any kind of gas appliances. You can make sure that your foundations are bolted, and I know the residences have done that. My wife and I for many years were involved in the program. We called it EQUIP. Now it's called. Yeah, but what's the emergency preparedness?
Oh, CERT?
CERT, yeah. And we organized drills, and we had, I guess our peak, we had over 125 blocks participating in an earthquake preparedness drill. And so it's got a lot of instructions about how to bolt and strap and how to, in fact, a lot of the problems are solved by bolting in plywood so that your buildings won't fail. Then the next problem you're going to have is access to water. So you can store some water, but you want to make sure that your pipes are in good shape. And then the other part of it would be, for a business like mine, power is the most important thing. If we can't communicate with our equipment, we're not going to be able to serve our clients, keep up with court appearances, stuff like that. So I don't know whether Albany's in a position to do anything like that, but the more that the city works with all of the building owners throughout the city to get solar power and backup battery generators or other kinds of generators, we could be off the grid and self-sufficient for a very long time here without any trouble.
Thank you. Yes?
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to go back to the communication thing. I have an unfinished thought. Not only is it a problem with the mechanism, but especially going back to the number of restaurants we have on the street, the restaurants have an extremely transitory staff who are very, very, very busy, and half the time, so it's a jungle in there, and the number of people that any one restaurant could have working for them is mind-blowing, actually. In some cases, I was like, wow, really? So that's another challenge, but not insurmountable.
Good. I don't have any other comment. The only thing would be, I'm sure there's best practices to rely upon from other communities or small business administration that would have something, but that would be off the top of my head.
So it sounds like we kind of have a sense of what resources might be helpful to businesses. Thank you for sharing that. And then this is getting at your comment, Alan. We find that it's also a challenge to connect with businesses. Lots of the small businesses are just overwhelmed already in terms of the time. And it seems like, I guess I'm looking to you if you have any suggestions for how we communicate with businesses, like how they might prefer to receive information from us. We had talked about a workshop, but then we got some pushback. But from that, maybe it's as simple as just sending a mailer to everybody. But I'm just curious, what would resonate with you?
It's the $1 million question. It really is.
So how do you do
I have zero.
How do we get them
I'm
motivated?
listening. I have nothing to
most
say.
of your communications with the avenue?
We try to hit as many directions as we can, so we use postcards that people don't have to open, email, but people don't. I'm even guilty of it. I don't read my emails. I've thrown out coupons that I've been waiting for in the mail. It's just, people are just saturated with stuff. I don't know the answer. I really. You got to go in, but then that's the other thing. Half the time they're busy. You could irritate them by doing that, but they're only here on Wednesdays after 4. They're only here. I know of a restaurant owner who won't talk to me about food donations or anything until after 10 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, I literally have to
We
call
have we have a comment
that
over here.
individual
Yep.
after 10 when he's not busy.
I think I'd like to second kind of what Alan hinted at about needing to not choose one, but try to offer communication in many different ways. And for me, like, I might have missed the email, but maybe I saw the Facebook post, or I might have missed those two things, but happened to see the postcard. So
I got the
think
Five Little
not-
Monkeys mailer this season.
Yay.
It was thick, and but it's one of those things. It's stuck out with the rest of the mail.
Good. But
You don't-
multiple angles, I think.
And you have a comment? Yeah. The only thing it isn't a solution immediate, but in the business license, perhaps there's a way to capture a cell number for the owner for emergency contact or for something to that effect. Pardon?
Well, the fire department has that information for every business?
But that doesn't mean the city has it.
It doesn't mean it's up to date.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's supposed to be when they go through and they do all their inspections.
so that's good intel. But regardless, I think that could be a way, and you're right, it's maybe going to be 70% good, 50% good, but it's better than nothing, especially if it's something to this emergency or something that is pertinent that would be of keen interest. So.
Yeah, this was a conversation that happened, although we didn't know that the fire department had this information, so that's helpful. We talked about that earlier today, and we have through AC Alert, which if anyone's not signed up, you should sign up for our emergency alerts. We certainly want to get business owners to sign up for emergency alerts to opt in, but there's another way where we could put their information on the back end of our system, and then in an actual emergency, we could communicate with them specifically, providing them business continuity resources. So,
Okay. Anything on your
I
end?
was just saying, because my father who owns a jewelry store, every year when we do the fire marshal inspection, stuff like that, they come and they take the name of his number, his landlord's number, if anything's
Oh,
changed
great.
and stuff like that, so.
Good
It's
intel.
not a constant annual updated. What they do with the data, I don't know.
Give it to the man. Give it to the
So
man.
I'm not sure that the fire department will release that information. There may be rules about their confidentiality, and that's one of the reasons people will work with the fire
Yeah, they're the
department.
ones who are essentially going to be needing it. and that's-
Sure, but the city might need it for communications. That's what the subject at hand is how,
Yeah, so we have ideas, we have good input, so that's good, thanks. Any other comment? Then, is your presentation done then?
yeah, no, I think, thank you. That was really helpful. What we're going to do is our consultant is preparing a strategy, a plan, and some sort of toolkit that then we will take and put on our website. And she's hoping to launch that at a workshop in late January. So
Awesome.
we'll update you at your next meeting.
Okay, with that.
We'll invite you to that workshop too.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to 6-2. So this is updates from the subcommittees. Business Improvement District. Any update?
we don't have an update, but we will get together and have a meeting about whether we're going to pursue that.
Okay, good. Farmers Market.
We did not get the opportunity to meet, and
I think you're kind of waiting for us on
we're
this
kind of
one.
waiting for, yeah. No update.
No update. Marketing and outreach, we have not met, but I did provide today a sampling of a brochure marketing piece that I thought would provide some understanding, at least from my perspective, and you take a look at it, be happy to walk you through that, and then maybe when we revise it, we can look at that.
Yeah, and I was able to connect with a graphic designer who is very busy, but we will work. We're planning to work in December on developing something. So if that's okay with you, I'll use the feedback that I got from the committee prior, plus the brochure you sent me, to develop something that we can share with you in February.
Good, thank you. Then the Arts Committee, absent, so unless there's
Andrea's not here. The Arts Committee, I received a request for them that the Arts Committee wants to come and speak at your next meeting. We're skipping the January meeting, so I invited them to the February 6th meeting. TBD whether they're available, but that's something that they'd like to do.
Very good.
So we're not meeting in January?
Correct. It's too close to the holidays.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the second.
'Cause
So,
I live for these meetings, and I'll be disappointed.
Well, 3 of you are welcome
You
to
can
meet
come.
separately.
3 of you. Exactly.
all right, then we have item 7, which is future agenda items, as we see here.
6th.
So we'll leave that at this point to staff to bring those forward. Any new item that the committee is desperately wanting to put on this?
I've got a question of just when the next phase of the San Pablo quarter plan will come through and when we see that. If you don't have an answer, that's understandable, but.
I don't have an answer, but I'll try to get an answer.
Cool.
We haven't heard anything about the project in months.
Cool, thank you.
Good. Okay,
It's on maternity leave.
so then item 8, our next meeting is Thursday, February 6th, 2020. Ta-da.
And I will be in Japan.
So we're going to meet in Tokyo then?
Kyoto about then, I think.
Good, we want a full report.
I
Future
get-
agenda item there.
Sorry. I get back from Germany, I believe that morning, so I may not be awake.
Maybe speaking German.
Can reschedule for later. We're not going to meet January 2nd because I won't be here. But we can reschedule for later in January if people want to.
No, leave it.
You want to leave it?
So I'll move the date.
Okay.
Exactly.
But we're going to be missing two 2 people, so we'll just track that and make sure that
We'll manage.
everyone else can
Who
join.
knows? You may be
We'll
one of the-
manage.
I might be.
Okay, so with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry I was late. I had a client.
Huh?
4:30.
So we're flying
Sorry, it's my
into
mistake.
one place that I don't remember.